Okay, we're going to kick it off with Matthew Felix. Matthew extends a subtle invitation to delve deeper into ourselves and the world around us, whether by awakening to our inner voices, taking us to new places, reminding us of our shared experience through laughter, or through his weekly podcast, providing a platform for stories that matter. Adventure, humor, and spirituality infuse his work, which draws on his experience in more than 50 countries. Porcelain Travels is a Forward Indies Book Award finalist and has been #1 on Amazon in travel, humor, and literary travel. And many of his stories have won Solus Awards. And I was so happy that Matthew came here also from the Bay Area, and he was just, he said, oh yeah, well, I was thinking about just going someplace and writing for a month, and so, you know, maybe I'll just go to Paris when you're there. And I was like, awesome, you can come and present. So please welcome Matthew Felix.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Caféothèque, Christina, and thank you very much. Excited to be here. She didn't have to ask twice. I think it was a split second after you said, well, do you want to come to Paris? And I was like, hell yeah, I'll go to Paris. So, okay, but I'm just going to jump right into it. She's already touched on a lot of the themes I'm going to talk about, which is really interesting because I didn't know her talk before I did my talk. So it's, again, talk about synchronicity and serendipity. It's almost as if she read this and then came up with hers. So, for years I resisted the urge to write. And then I quit my job for what would be the first of many times and ran off to Spain and hid out in an Andalusian village just so that I could explore my creativity. My novel, A Voice Beyond Reason, and in fact, oh, am I in the way here? And, oh God, my eyes. It's much better on your eyes when you're not standing in the way. So my novel, A Voice Beyond Reason, and basically most of what has followed are the result of, or is the result of my time in that Spanish village, sort of being a hermit in the mountains, just trying to get in touch with my creativity. One of the main themes of my novel is, which is about a young Spaniard's awakening to his intuition, is how when we overcome our resistance to our inner voice and trust where it will lead us, then we sort of get onto a path that's more true to where we want our lives to go and more true to ourselves. But often we resist that inner voice because what it's telling us doesn't seem to make sense. Well, writing a book about my experiences in bathrooms did not make sense. But I will get to that in a little later, in a little while. So, while I was living in my Andalusian village, I had to leave every 3 months to get my visa renewed. And so obviously Morocco was the closest and easiest place to do that. So every 3 months I would go down to Morocco. I made 2 trips there while I was living in Andalusia. And both times that I went to Morocco, I had very sort of over-the-top experiences. So I came back and I wrote those stories down. Well, at the same time, in the little house that I was living in the village in Andalusia, and during those 2 trips to Morocco, I also had some really unforgettable bathroom experiences. So I came back and I turned those into stories as well. And then I sent those stories just to family and friends at the time, not really planning on doing anything with them, and just to kind of share the experiences, and then I really sort of forgot about them. About 10 years later, I was getting ready to publish my novel, and I thought, which I had decided to do on my own, and I thought, you know, I really don't know anything about publishing, so I should sort of do a beta test, sort of do a test run, so that I can learn the process for publishing a book, how to market a book, and just everything involved in getting a book out into the world. And so then I thought of those Morocco stories that I had written 10 years earlier. So I dug them back out and I took a look and I thought they're kind of good. But since I had spent a lot of money on the novel, which was my main project again at the time, I hired an editor and a proofreader and a cover designer, so I didn't have any money to dedicate to the Morocco book. So I decided to edit it myself. My aunt volunteered to proofread it, and then I designed the cover. Well, much to my very genuine surprise, as soon as I released it, it went to #1, as Erin just mentioned, in the Morocco category and in the Africa category, which was, again, a genuine surprise, and of course, I couldn't have been happier. Not exactly a New York Times seller, or bestseller, but for me, having basically 0 expectations, I was pretty stoked. And it also made me wonder, why I had been so resistant to publishing those stories all those years earlier, because obviously I could have done that much earlier. After I published my novel and the Morocco book, friends and family started saying, okay, so when are you publishing your bathroom stories? And my reaction was, I'm not publishing my bathroom stories. I never had any intention of publishing the bathroom stories. Again, it was just sort of something fun I did at the time. Besides, did I really want to be known as the bathroom guy, right? And could I be funny on paper? You know, it's difficult to write humor. And I appreciated that some of my friends and family thought the stories were funny, but to be honest, I just kind of thought they were okay. I really didn't think that they merited that sort of attention. What's more, the humor in the stories is really at my own expense. So did I want to publish stories along those lines? Did I want to admit to some of the embarrassing things I did, the humiliating situations I got myself into? Did I want to tell the world about losing control of my bowels on the Nile? Did I want to admit to peeing inside a building accidentally when I was in Eastern Europe? And it wasn't just the physiological things, right? Did I want to admit to some of the pathetic places I stayed when I was traveling, and to some of the abuse and the manipulation that I allowed myself to sort of endure in different circumstances? In short, would I be revealing more about myself than I wanted to share? And the answer was yes. So I didn't publish the book. Rather than trusting kind of where I was naturally being guided and what my heart was telling me, again, I resisted and I held back. Well, a year later, friends and family were still asking me when I was going to publish the bathroom stories. And so I thought, okay, if people are bringing these stories up and I'm not, I need to hear that. I need to get over myself, put my ego to the side, and revisit those stories. So I revisited the stories, dug them back out, and I still didn't think they were that funny. But in the time that had elapsed, working on my two other books, my novel and the Morocco book, I had worked with a brilliant editor. I had worked with just savage, ruthless beta readers, and I had worked with a very supportive writing group. So now I felt like I was a better writer, and even though I didn't think the stories were where I wanted them to be, I thought that I saw kind of how to get them there, how I could get them to a place where I would be comfortable sort of sharing them with the world and publishing them. Meanwhile, over the course of 10 years of travel, I had amassed or gathered, a whole bunch more bathroom stories, because I travel I'm a budget traveler, and I always end up in these places, and so I had more stories. So I realized I had a full book. So just to give you a quick idea about some of the stories, here's a very quick look at them, at four of them. I don't know how well we'll be able to hear.
The first story is called It Ain't Over. From my first arrival in Tangier, Morocco. I had a horrible arrival, I was harassed. I get to the hotel and I'm thinking that everything is done and that I've made it. And it turns out that there's one more sort of pseudo-cultural experience that awaits me.
The Bin and the Bomb is sort of a collection of stories within the overall collection. It's a bunch of little stories that all take place during my time staying in these servants' quarters in Paris. And the bathing situation was bizarre, everything about this place was bizarre.
I was in Eastern Europe and I had to go to the bathroom really, really badly. And as I was going to the bathroom, I realized that all was not what it seemed. A day at the beach. Now this story recounts one of the strangest days of my life. We went to the Dead Sea and we were in the West Bank having a nice day doing the whole mud thing, and things went really, really wrong.
Let it flow. This is the second to the last story.
I'm on a bus in Turkey and I've really, really got to go, but the bus is not stopping. And so the story is about, again, how I sort of deal with that.
Okay, so I felt like the best place to talk about the stories naturally was in the tub and shower. But just a couple other examples of stories that are in the book. There's the time my friend caught on fire in my bathroom, the time I slept in a bathroom, the time I slept in a chicken coop in the Arctic Circle, the time I woke up with a roach on my head, the Turkish bath experience that ended in bloodshed, and the time my backpack was stolen from between my legs, and the time I was physically assaulted over a misunderstanding about a bidet. So, literally. So, and as you can tell, some of those stories they're not specifically related to bathrooms, and that's because sometimes the bathroom just sort of makes a cameo, and it's almost just an excuse to bring stories that I thought were good enough into the collection. So once I decided to actually, to publish Porcelain Travels, as the book became known, as we've already said, to Aaron's point, unexpected doors started to open. Once I stopped resisting and I decided to publish the book. First off, a door opened onto validation. So once I started telling people that I was going to do porcelain travels and what the concept was, and I was always a little hesitant, usually they would laugh, but then what was really telling is they would share their own bathroom stories. Because even though the idea for the book is a little silly and maybe some of the stories are embarrassing, nonetheless, the themes are universal, which I very quickly learned because we all hopefully use the toilet, the tubs, or showers. So that felt good and was good to know, reassuring for me to find out. Another unexpected door came in the form of an interview. Before the book was done, as it was getting closer to being done, I was asked to do an interview on an internet radio station in downtown San Francisco about the book. 2 weeks later, I had my own show, weekly 2-hour show on that internet radio station that I had never intended, never thought about doing a podcast, never thought about doing any sort of broadcasting. But because of this book and that interview, it ended up happening. So here's a quick excerpt to give you an idea of what my podcast, which I'm still doing, is kind of about.
Fame kept cropping up.
The dark gives meaning to the light. So tell us about that for
I
you.
think we always have to be seekers, not finders.
I have to say that you have some amazing selfies. I've seen a lot of your selfies. I'm running. Please do.
Thanks.
So it really is like an open, creative, intuitive, experimental process. This is what I was trying to find. The language for a place that I went to when I was younger that was deeply and shimmered with pain. A place that could not have experienced without something cracking open and seeing the world differently.
And yet, there are a lot of funny moments. She was a confident chewer. Quote, I liked hearing, okay, hold on, or run over by farm machinery.
It's terrible that we're
It's
laughing
terrible,
at
I know.
this.
So I wanted obviously to show Erin and Lorna, who have both been guests on my show, and she's going to be on my show again while we're here in Paris. But I also wanted to show, I try to have deep, meaningful conversations, but I also want to have fun. And so I tried to find that balance, and with these two it's easy to do. And with most of the guests it's easy to do. And then I included that third clip, author Nona Kaspers, her book is The Fifth Woman. If you haven't read her book, it's absolutely exquisite, and I just had her on a couple weeks ago. But I wanted to show that's also my new setup. I've moved from the radio station, and now I do it in a literary center in San Francisco instead, which gives me a lot more flexibility. But also to give you an idea, so the slogan for the show is people who create and people who make a difference. And oftentimes, obviously, those people are the same. So it's writers, filmmakers, but then it's also, I had people talking about the dark sky movement, preserving the dark skies, preserving agricultural land in Marin County, acupuncturists, medical marijuana, lots of different social and environmental and health-related issues as well. So I try to do a big variety of stuff on the show. The other unexpected door that I will mention, Erin has actually already touched on. My editor kept saying I should be performing, and I kept saying, that's just a whole other world, it's a whole other undertaking, it's hard enough figuring out this writing thing, and I just kept resisting that, right? Well, then I had my editor on my show because she has a new book coming out, and we had a conversation afterwards, and she was insisting, you need to be performing. So I submitted a show based on the book, a 20-minute one-man show based on porcelain travels, and it was accepted by the Marsh Theater in San Francisco. And so I just performed that twice in March, and here's a quick clip from that show.
Oftentimes, some of the most unforgettable experiences we have are either in or somehow related to the bathroom. Like the place I stayed in Barcelona. The tiny space was just big enough for a full-size futon. A couple of feet from the futon, there was a fireplace. To the left of the fireplace was the kitchen, or rather a hot plate and a sink and a toilet. Now, European kitchens often have washing machines, but I'd never seen one with a toilet before. Being an open mind, however, I immediately saw the advantages. I could snack while relieving myself. If I wanted to, in fact, there was nothing to stop me from having a full meal. The mini fridge was just an arm's length on the commode. Scarcely moving home so I could complete the entire digestive process for days at a time. The implications for my productivity were staggering. Thank you very much.
And then the last story that I'll mention before I wrap up here is, if you had told me in 2006 that when I was bathing in a rubber bin in a chambre de bain in the 15e, that I would be invited back to Paris 13 years later to talk about having bathed in a bin in a chambre de bain in the 15e, I would have laughed in your face. And yet, thanks to the book, thanks to Aaron, thanks to the Caféothèque, that's exactly what has happened. So, I don't know where my creative processes are headed, and despite some encouraging successes that I've talked about today, it's still very day by day and figuring out one step at a time. What I do know is that it turns out that writing a book about my experiences in bathrooms made perfect sense after all. So, thank you very much.